After working with your data for a while, you decide you'd rather rotate your list and have the current set of row labels running across the columns. Whatever you do, don't even think about rekeying the data. When you need to flip-flop a list in Excel, don't waste time doing it manually. I am Nabil Murad. Although transposing is the declared topic for this video, however, this tutorial has a much greater benefit, as you will learn how to combine different functions and functionalities in achieving a special goal in Excel. You could apply the concepts to many other situations. I'll show you 8 methods to switch columns into rows without retyping the information, including tools, shortcuts, functions, Power Query, and dynamic arrays. So let's see how we do that in Excel. Here is my start file. You can download the exercise file and follow along by clicking on the link below the video. I have a list in columns A, B, C, D, E, which shows in the column header, in the top row, in row number 1, it shows a region, and in the left column, column A, it shows a month. At the intersection of each region and each month, I have an amount, which is the sum of sales for each region in each month. What I would like to do is to rotate this list, is to flip this list. I want to switch the columns into rows and get the setup that you see on the right-hand side. So what used to be a column header will become a row header, and what used to be a row header in column A will become a column header. I created a color association so you can recognize what we are doing. So the orange color corresponds to the column header, will become the row header, and what you see right now in green, which is the row header in the source, will become a column header in the destination. Let me explain the concept in a different way by using cell reference. So I'm going to click on the next worksheet, Concept. And in the Concept worksheet, I have the cell references. And then I showed you on the destination side what should happen with the cell reference. So here are the cell references for the top row, and they become row headers in the destination. So the column letter in the destination is incrementing as I go up and down, A, B, C, D, E, while the row number is incrementing as I move right and left. Remember this point. That's a key point for switching our data. The column letter is incrementing as I move up and down, and the row number is incrementing as I copy right and left. Now, let's see the different methods for switching our rows into columns. I'll start with the Paste Special technique. I click on the Paste Special worksheet, and I start by selecting the source list, and I go up at the top to the left side of the Home tab. I click on Copy, and then I go to the cell in the upper left corner of my destination, and then I click on the down arrow of the Paste command, and I'll be selecting the rightmost option in the second row. It reads Transpose. So when I click on Transpose, I would have switched the columns into rows and the rows into columns. But note, that's not dynamic. So if any change happens to the source, it won't be reflected on the destination. Let's see the next technique. I'll be doing the same exact thing, but this time I'll be using shortcuts. Let's select any single cell in the source. I want to select the entire source list with a shortcut, so I hit Control asterisk. The asterisk is the multiplication symbol on the numeric keypad, and then I want to copy, so I use the shortcut Control C to copy, and then I want to go to the destination cell I1, and here I would like to paste with a shortcut, which is Alt ESE. Alt ESE, and when I hit enter, I would have transposed my list. For the next technique, I'll be using a function, and this function requires selecting up front the corresponding number of columns and rows. Because in the source I have 5 columns and 13 rows, then I'll be selecting 13 columns and 5 rows, and I start creating my function. This function is called an array function, which simply means it doesn't require locking and unlocking the range, and at the same time you shouldn't be hitting enter, you should be hitting CSE, which is Control-Shift-Enter. This function is called transpose, so I'll be typing equal transpose. and then I hit Tab. What would you like to transpose? Well, I would like to transpose my original list, so I click and drag to select the original list. Note that I'm not locking anything. I close the bracket. If I hit Enter, it won't work. I have to hit Ctrl-Shift-Enter, and I would have transposed my list. Now let's move to the next method, dynamic arrays. Because I'm using for this tutorial Office 365 with Office Insider, I can use the dynamic array functions. And let's see how am I going to transpose my list by typing one single function, and it will spread to the adjacent columns and rows. It will spill to the adjacent columns and rows. I'll be typing equal transpose. And then I hit Tab. What would you like to transpose? Well, I would like to transpose this entire list, and then I close the bracket. Note that I'm typing my function in one single cell, I1. Note that I'm not hitting Ctrl-Shift-Enter, I'm just hitting Enter, and my function will spill to the adjacent cells. If you click on any cell other than the one in which I created my function and look at the formula bar, it's grayed out because the function lives in this cell in the upper left corner, cell I1. For my next technique, I'll be using some classical function. And here I copied the cell reference that should be in the destination. We need the contents of A1, A2, A3. I want you to note that when I move right and left, the row number is incrementing, and when I move up and down, it's the column letter that's incrementing. We need to talk about two functions. A function that increments as I copy up and down, and that's the rows function. The rows function is a function that increments when you copy up and down. How does it work? It counts how many rows you have between two cells. So if I type equal rows and then I hit Tab, I want to select any cell. It could be any cell you like, but hit Shift colon to select the same exact cell one more time, close the bracket, and lock the first reference by putting your blinking cursor in that reference and then hit F4. So from V1 to V1, how many cells we have? We have one, but as I copy down, because the first reference is locked and the second reference is not, then it will create an incremental number. Look at the rows function. The rows function increments when you copy up and down. It doesn't increment when you copy right and left. So let's undo this step. We have another function that increments when we copy right and left, but not up and down. That's the columns function. Equal columns. It will count how many columns you have between two cells. Select any cell you like, and then hit Shift colon, and then close the bracket. We need to lock the first cell reference, so I put my blinking cursor in the first cell reference, and then I hit F4, and then I hit Enter. From columns V1 to V1, I have one single column. And because the first reference is locked and the second one is not locked, when I copy right and left, it's incrementing. The columns function does not increment when you copy up and down. It only increments right and left. So these two functions are exactly the opposite of each other. Rows increments up and down. Columns increments right and left. Keep that in mind because I'm going to create an index function. What's the index function? The index function is an extraction function. It requires an array, which is this one. And from this array, I specify I want to extract a value from a specific row and a specific column. So it requires a row number and a column number. Let's see how we create this function. I'm going to select cell I1 where I'll be creating my function. Note here I have a model for the destination. I want to increment the column letter up and down. I want to increment the row number right and left. So let's see how we do that. Equal index, and then I hit Tab. Index of which range? I need this entire range, and I'm going to lock this range because I'll be copying, so I hit F4 to lock the range, and then I hit comma. Now it asks me about the row number. Look at the row number, it's incrementing in the model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as I copy right and left. Which functions increment right and left? It's the columns function. So I'll be typing equal columns, and then I hit Tab, and then I want to select any single cell you like, it doesn't make any difference. Hit Shift colon to select the same exact cell, close the bracket and lock the first reference, put your blinking cursor and then hit F4 to lock it. The columns function creates an incremental number, right and left. Click at the end of the columns function and type a comma. Look at the screen tip here. It asks for a column number. I want to increment up as I go up and down. What's the name of the function that increments up and down? It's the rows function. So I'll be typing rows. And then rows of what? Select any cell you like. The same cell by hitting Shift colon. Close the bracket for the index function. Note that I have to lock the first reference as I showed you before, so I put my blinking cursor in the first cell reference of the rows function, hit the F4 key to lock it, and now I hit enter. It's extracting the contents of cell A1. So look at this. If I copy down, I should be extracting B1, which is east, then west, then north and south. Let's copy down. And it's working just fine. Let me copy right and left, and I was able to extract all the values after rotating or flipping or switching the columns into rows and the rows into columns. My next technique is a very creative technique. I'll be using a special function called the character function. What does the character function do? Let's understand the concept. The character function returns a character corresponding to a number. The character function for the numbers from 65 to 90 corresponds to the alphabet from A to Z in uppercase. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to type equal character equal CHAR and then I hit tab. Character of 65. When I close the bracket, it's returning capital A. What if I copy down? If I copy down, I'm getting A, B, C, D, E. That's wonderful. How am I going to use the character function? Note that in the model that I showed you with the cell reference, the column letter is incrementing up and down. Isn't that the same pattern of the character function from 65 to 69? And the number is incrementing right and left. Isn't that what a columns function does? Let's see, how am I going to increment up and down and be able to copy the function without having to generate these numbers? What if I say equal character and then I hit tab, character of 64 plus, I want plus 1 for the first one to return A, plus 2, plus 3, plus 4. Isn't that the row number? So what if I use a row function that returns the row number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and be added to the character function? So what if I said equal row, open bracket, close bracket? The row function will extract the row number. So in the first occurrence, it will be returning 1. If added to the 64, that becomes 65, which is letter A. So I close the bracket and then hit enter. I get letter A. I can copy down, and because the row function is incrementing, then I'm getting A, B, C, D, E, and that's the concept I'll be using to return the cell reference that looks like this model here below. I'm selecting the cell in the destination in the upper left corner, and I type equal character, and then I hit tab, character 64 plus the row, open bracket, close bracket, that will be returning letter A. But I don't want A, I want 1. And as I copy to the right, I want 2, 3, 4, 5. What's the name of the function that increments as I copy right and left? I hit F2. It's the columns function. So I'll be joining it with a joining operator. Shift 7 on your keyboard to a columns function. Columns of what? Any cell you like. And the same cell one more time. Shift colon to select the same cell. Close the bracket. Very important here, don't forget to lock the first cell reference. Put your blinking cursor in the first cell reference and hit F4 to lock it, and that will return an incremental number. Let's hit enter. I have A1. That's the same exact thing. Let me copy to the right to see the incremental number. When I copy to the right, A1, A2, A3, A4. When I copy up and down, I'm getting the same exact cell reference. But hold on a second. Do we want to return the cell reference, or we want the contents of the cell? Well, in order to return the content of a cell, I need to wrap all these functions in an indirect function. So let's hit F2. And then before the character function, I'm going to type indirect. And the indirect function will take this cell reference and will return the contents of this cell. I close the bracket and then I hit Control Enter, and I was able to switch my columns into rows. For technique number 7, I want to write the cell references preceded by a prefix. So let's say this prefix could be anything. I'm going to use an abbreviation for my company, the OfficeInstructor. So here I want A1, look at the model, A1, B1, C1, D1, E1. So what if I select the first cell and I type OfficeInstructor OI followed by A1, and then I hit enter, OfficeInstructor B1, and then I hit enter, OI C1, and then I hit enter, OI D1, and then I hit enter, OI E1. When I do this, I can select the entire range, and when I copy to the right, the number will increment as I move across the columns. So I hover over the lower right corner, and I copy to the right, and I get an incremental number. In order to get the value from the corresponding cell reference without the prefix, I'm going to use the find and replace. To open the replace dialog box, I use the shortcut Control H, and I want to say, well, I want to replace OI with an equal sign. So I'll get an equal sign, equal A1, equal B1, and so on. So I'll be typing an equal sign, and then I want to replace all. So when I replace all, it made 65 replacement, close the bracket. All what I need to do is to expand these columns a little bit so that I can see the numbers. That was technique number 7. It requires some typing, but if you like it, that's fine. Let's go to the last technique by using Power Query. And to use Power Query, I need to convert my original list into a table, and I'm going to use the shortcut Control T. Table starts with T, Control T, and then I hit enter to convert it into a table. I don't like this style, so I'm going to remove it. It's just a personal preference. I remove this style, and now I want to name my table, so I'm going to name it on the left side of the Table Design tab. I'm going to name it My Source. I named my table, I hit enter, and now I want to send it to Power Query. I do that by clicking on the Data tab of the ribbon, and on the Data tab I click on From Table. Here is my list in the query editor. To the right side I see the name of my table, My Source, and below it I see the applied steps. There is a step that has been added automatically, change type. I don't need it, so I'm going to roll it out by clicking on the deletion symbol. What I would like to do is to switch the columns into rows. When I try to switch the columns into rows, look at the top row. East, west, north, and south. This one will disappear. So if I go to the Transform tab and then click on the Transpose command, look what happens. Yes, it switched my entire list, but I lost the top row. So I'm going to undo this step. I go to the Apply step, and I delete this step by clicking on the deletion symbol, and I'm going to do an extra step before this. I want to push the top row down. So on the Transform tab, use first row as header. I'm going to click on the down arrow, and I'll be selecting use header as first row. What does it mean? It means I'm pushing the header down. I push the header down. Now if I go to the Transpose command, if I lose the top row, that doesn't matter, because the one that I want is the one below it. So if I click on Transpose right now, it transposes my list. I have exactly what I want, but I want to move the months to the top row, so I'm going to use the opposite command. I click on the down arrow for use first row as headers, and I'll be selecting the upper command, use first row as header, and that will promote the months to the top row. Now that I fixed everything, I want to review the data types. I click on January and then press the Shift key and click on the last month. And I would like to change the data type for this range by right-clicking, change type, and I want to set it as currency. It asks me, would you like to make a replacement? Yes, I do. And now I'm ready to send my data back into Excel. So I'm going to click on the Home tab, and then click on the down arrow for Close and Load, and then click on Close and Load to. I want to send it back to the same exact worksheet, so I select Existing Worksheet, and then I select the destination cell I1, and when I hit OK, I would have flipped my list. I can close the queries and connections, and here is my list flipped. If more records are added, you can simply refresh the query. I showed you 8 methods to switch columns into rows without retyping the information, including tools, shortcuts, functions, Power Query, and dynamic arrays. And if you enjoyed this training video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel to be notified when new tutorials are released. The best is yet to come. Thank you for watching and see you next time.